Hello class, we're back again and we have 3 more councils. Now we're counting only 7 ecumenical councils because that's how many there are that are truly ecumenical. The Roman Catholic Church counts 21 ecumenical councils, but for our purposes we're only recognizing the first 7 as truly ecumenical. And in this lecture, the Middle Ages, councils 5, 6, and 7, we're going to finish those councils and begin moving into the Middle Ages. The next council we want to look at is the Second Council of Constantinople. It was held in 553. It renewed condemnations of old heresies, Arianism, Nestorianism, and Monophysitism. And you can see in the notes specific items that were rejected under Monophysitism. Also, at this time, Origen was officially condemned as a heretic, not because his writings were in themselves heretical, but because all of these different heresies seem to spring from the application of his methodology and his theology. He was seen as the fountain of all heresies. Heffley writes in his History of the Councils of the Church, certainly the Fifth Synod anathematized Origen, but not in a special session and not in consequence of special transactions, but only transiundo and in cumulo, since in their 11th anathematism among a number of old heretics, they brought forward his name. In other words, they condemned him as a heretic in passing, because of the cumulative effect of his writings on spawning new heresies. The Third Council of Constantinople in 680 dealt with what is called the Monothelite controversy. This is an outgrowth of the Council of Chalcedon, where we dealt with the two natures in one person. This now leads to the question, did Christ have two wills or one will? Did he just have a divine will? Or did he have a divine will and a human will? And before you think this is needless philosophical wrangling, here's the nub of it. If Christ had only a divine will, and if, as James says in his epistle, God cannot be tempted, were the temptations of Christ real? It goes to the question of the temptation of Christ, what theologians call the peccability of Christ. Was the temptations that he experienced, were they real temptations? Two wills in Christ or one? That is the question. The church has affirmed that Christ is two natures in one person. Does that mean he has one or two wills? Does he have a divine will and a human will, or just a divine will? The monothelite position, that he had only one will, affirmed all operation and activity of the will proceeds solely from the Logos. The human nature is but a mere instrument, and so there's no human will there. There's only a divine will. Constantinople II met from 680 to 681. The position that Christ had two wills, diothelitism, was defended by Sophronius of Jerusalem, the Bishop of Jerusalem, who was, by the way, the Bishop of Jerusalem when it fell to the Muslim invaders. It was defended by him in the presence of Cyrus of Alexandria, who was a monothelite. Sergius of Constantinople prohibited the teaching of monothelite doctrine in his jurisdiction, but supported it and wrote to Pope Honorius in Rome. Honorius defended the monothelite position, leading to a division between the East and the West for a while. Emperor Constantine III presided over the council. The purpose of the council was to heal the rift between the East and the West and to resolve the question. Sergius, Cyrus, and Honorius were cited as authorities in the council in favor of the monothelite position. Leo's tome was cited in favor of two powers or wills or operations. George of Constantinople was won over to the diothelite position at the council. Sergius, Cyrus, and Honorius were condemned as heretics. Don't miss this point. This is the first, and as far as I know, the only time a recognized pope of the Roman Church was condemned as a heretic. The Diothelite doctrine was confirmed as orthodox, and the breach between Rome and Constantinople was healed. So be aware, there has been an instance in the history of the church when a pope was condemned as a heretic. Nicaea II was the next major council. It met in 787, and it dealt with what is called the iconoclastic controversy. And this is the controversy over whether or not there should be icons in church worship. So what were the perspectives on the role of icons? In the West, the worship of the saints, that is relic worship, led to the worship of icons. In the Eastern Church, the worship of icons was viewed as a necessary affirmation of the reality of the incarnation of Christ and a source of theological education and reflection. Now, why is this important? The East argued that because God had become a true human being in the person of Jesus Christ, God in the person of Christ could be represented by a two-dimensional drawing. And we'll get to the details of that when we get to the council itself. Here's the timeline of the controversy. Icons were condemned at a synod of Elvira in Spain in 305 to 306. Gradually, though, the presence of icons gained acceptance, especially in the East. Emperor Leo III banned icon worship in 726. He ordered the destruction of icons in 730. A council was held in Constantinople in 754, called by Constantine V, his son, and this council condemned icons. Stephen of Rome, the Bishop of Rome, ignored this council. The patriarchs of Jerusalem, Alexandria, and Antioch were unable to attend because they were living under Muslim rule and couldn't get there. A synod in Gentili near Paris under Pippin the Short was held in 767, but the decision is unknown. Empress Irene called Nicaea II in 787 to overturn the decision of the Council of 754. Charlemagne published a work condemning the worship of icons, but endorsing their decorative use in 790. There was a synod held in Frankfurt in 794 that approved Charlemagne's position. A synod in Paris in 825 reaffirmed the Synod of Frankfurt. It was held under Louis the Pious, son of Charlemagne. A synod in Constantinople was held on the 19th of February, 842, and declared the first day of Lent the victory of orthodoxy in the Eastern liturgical calendar, a kind of celebration of victory over the iconoclasts who sought to destroy the icons. And so the first day of Lent in the Eastern Church every year is the celebration of the victory of orthodoxy. Now, who were the iconoclastic leaders? Well, Leo III, Emperor of the Byzantine Empire, he began his life as a peasant who rose through the ranks in the military to become an emperor. His goal was to counter the Muslim accusation that Christians were idolaters. The military was solidly iconoclastic. The military rejected the use of icons. Bishop Constantius of Nicaea was also a leader. Anastasius of Constantinople, who was Leo's choice for patriarch, also supported it. And Constantine V, Leo's son, was a supporter of the iconoclastic position. Theodosius of Ephesus, who presided over Constantinople in 754, was also a supporter of the iconoclastic position. The leader of the iconodules, or the servants of the icons, those who favored the icons, were John of Damascus. He is the only scholastic theologian in the Eastern Church. He articulated the incarnational defense of icons, that as a result of the incarnation, icons are legitimate. Germanus, who had been deposed as Patriarch of Constantinople. The monks supported the manufacture of icons because this was what they did. This is where they got their money. The stock and trade of the icons of the monks was in the manufacturing of icons for churches and homes. Empress Irene, who was the wife of Leo IV, supported the icons. Tarasius, chosen as Patriarch of Constantinople by Irene, supported it even though he was a layman when chosen to be patriarch. And Popes Gregory II, Gregory III, Stephen III, and Hadrian I all supported the icons. Here's the iconoclastic argument. The second commandment and related passages against idolatry forbid the making and use of icons. They also appealed to the church fathers, Epiphanius, Gregory Nazianzus, John Chrysostom, and several others. And they argued that the Eucharist is the only proper image of Christ. Nicaea II was convened at the request of Empress Irene in 787. She ascended the throne when her husband died and her son was in his nonage, that is, too young to rule. Tarasius presided with 350 bishops present. John of Damascus and one Thomas represented the Eastern bishops living under Muslim rule. They nullified Constantinople 754 as an illegitimate council and declared it heretical. And they sanctioned and limited the worship of icons. And let me just give you a little bit of information here. What the Council of Nicaea II said was that an icon cannot be a three-dimensional statue. It can only be a two-dimensional representation. So it has to be a flat surface, or at least if it's a bas relief, it cannot exist beyond the flat surface of the wall. Okay? Also, only icons of Mary and Jesus are to be prayed to. Icons of the saints are to be prayed in front of, but not prayed to. But they also said that without the worship of icons, the worship is not valid. You cannot have legitimate, orthodox, God-honoring worship without the icons. So freestanding statues are forbidden under the terms of the Second Nicene Council. What were their arguments? Well, they argued on the basis of religious art in the Old Testament temple. They argued on the basis of forged patristic testimony. And they argued on the basis of the place of honor given to leading supporters of the icons. So what was the aftermath then of the Second Nicene Council? The conflict over the use of icons continued for another 38 years. The military remained solidly iconoclastic. Monks and common people favored the icons. The final victory came with the Synod of Constantinople in 842. It further divided and weakened the empire against the invading Muslims. And according to Dr. Craig Blazing, who was one of my doctoral supervisors when I was in seminary and who now is at Southwestern Seminary, the Eastern Byzantine Empire fell to the Muslims as an act of divine judgment against them for having embraced the icons. And so that is our discussion of these four ecumenical councils. We're going to, next lecture, we'll drop back and look at Augustine and the Pelagian controversy.